What's up, you guys? I'm Anya.
And I'm Kylie, and this is 2 Degrees Hotter.
The post-grad podcast where we get real about life after college every Tuesday.
Right, so now that we've gone over the one that everyone knows, the SMART goals, we're going to talk through a couple other, techniques you could say that you might prefer that might work better for you. Maybe you just haven't heard of them. So one of the ones that I found, I don't know if it's BHAG or BAG, but it stands for Big, Hairy, Audacious Goals, which is pretty funny. And it comes from a book called Built to Last by James Collins and Jerry Porras. And it was used mostly like in a company context in their book, but I think a lot of people have translated it to more personal use. So basically what it means is that you start with like a really inspirational goal, a big, hairy, audacious goal. And then you mold that into an achievable goal that you break down into actions and you create a system around achieving it. So I found an example from a blog post that I was reading about big, hairy, audacious goals. And so this blog post was by Kevin Ferguson, and he kind of ran through like what one of his would be so that you can kind of understand the framework better. So your big inspirational goal is you want to write a book. So then you kind of mold that into a more achievable goal. Create 6 blog entries this year because that'll get you closer. Maybe you'll practice your writing and eventually you'll get closer to writing a book. The actions associated with that goal would be to choose a topic for the first blog, write a first draft of an article, and then set up a blog site or identify an existing blog to publish the post. And then the part that I feel like is the most significant and like different from other frameworks that I've read is the system aspect. So then the system for this goal would be to write and read regularly, to practice writing and make it a daily habit. So I think the systems part of it kind of discusses how to actually work it into your day-to-day more than other systems do, and like making a system around the goal will hold yourself accountable to it more often. And so I kind of liked that one in the sense that it brought up this whole systems element, and that it would start with a big, hairy, audacious goal, and then you kind of work it into achievable ones, actions, and a system around getting there. So that was one that I found that maybe you like that better than SMART goals, or maybe you can take a little piece of that and a little piece of this one, whatever works for you.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a good way to make like a kind of bigger, scarier goal a bit more palatable, easier to, get a grip on and actually make some like actionable progress towards. But then our last little technique is backwards goal setting. So this is like, is it a Gantt chart?
I've always said Gantt chart.
Gantt chart.
Gantt.
Yeah. So think of the end product and then work backwards on every step along the way to get there. So I feel like this honestly goes in line a lot with the BHAG setting, where you start with the goal, where you want to end up, and you work your way backwards to figure out where the best place to start and get that whole, step-by-step process underway.
And I feel like this one was really successful for me when I did it for my capstone project.
Mm-hmm.
So my capstone for undergrad was like a 30-page paper, and that can sound really scary and like unwieldy when you think about it at the beginning of the semester, and you're like, oh crap, I have 4 months to write this and I don't even have a topic. Like, what am I going to do? But working backwards for that was really helpful, specifically with like keeping myself on track to get to the page count. So I'd be like, okay, I need at least 30 pages by this day. So how many pages can I write per week, keeping in mind like spring break and whatever, to never like super overwhelm myself, like to stay on track throughout the entire semester. So I think that was a good one to work backwards in like a Gantt chart way. And obviously a lot of like organizations use Gantt charts and stuff, and I think that they're pretty useful. So maybe that helps you as well.
Yeah, and I think it is kind of like you said, a really good system, especially for kind of academic goals, because a lot of the times you have due dates and things like that. So good thing to keep in mind for those types of goals as well.
Definitely. So now we're going to get into some tips for holding yourself accountable to your goals. And the first one that I wanted to talk about is to set priorities within your goals, because I feel like when you have several goals, they can all feel like they're carrying the same weight in your head. But that can feel really overwhelming because you might have too many goals and it's hard to direct your attention to the most important ones. So I think if you have maybe like 5 goals, really like rank them and prioritize the ones that are most important to you. And that'll help you not feel so bad when maybe you only accomplished 3 out of 5 because you had set priorities on which ones were most important and maybe the ones that would be okay to carry on to next year or next month or whatever. So I think it just helps categorize them, and it goes into our next tip a little more. So I'll let Kylie talk about the goal competition thing.
Yes. So if you find prioritizing many goals to be hard, psychologists have a concept that they refer to as goal competition. So this says that one of the greatest barriers to achieving your goals is the other goals that you have. In other words, if your goals are competing with one another for your time and attention, whenever you chase a new goal, you have to pull focus and energy from your other pursuits. If you find this happening in your life, press pause and focus on one goal at a time. So, kind of like you were saying, if you have, even if you only have 3 to 5 goals, which realistically is probably what we all set at the beginning of the year, when they're swarming all around in your head and you don't necessarily know how to prioritize them, it can seem really overwhelming. And before you know it, you've kind of given up or slacked off on all of your goals. Whereas if you just take the time to press pause and really think about what goal is most important to you, and what goal you really want to focus on in the moment, then you are better equipped to actually take on all of your goals because you've learned to prioritize and kind of take things one at a time.
Yeah, and I think this lends itself best to goals that could be broken down on like a month by month basis, for
Yeah.
example. So definitely something to think about. And then another tip that we have when it comes to holding yourself accountable is coming up with a system for tracking them. Because when you actually are tracking your goals, you're so much more likely to achieve them because you're, having that satisfaction of seeing your work come to life makes it so much more rewarding, and it makes it feel like there's a reason behind what you're doing. So finding a system that works for you to actually track your goals, whether that's a bullet journal, maybe you use Notion. I've been trying to set up Notion for my own life. Maybe I'll talk about that in a future episode. Or like a weekly check-in for yourself on all of your goals, just like figuring out what works for you to actually keep track of them, because otherwise it can feel like this big, like nebulous thing that's hard and has no purpose. So I think that's a really good tip for you guys.
Yeah, for sure.
So some other tips that we have are to state your goal as a positive statement. So this will be actually interesting when we look through some of the goals that you guys have submitted to see if you submitted them as positive statements or not, because this wasn't really something I ever thought about before, but I found this example online that said, um, you know, don't miss a deadline again could be someone's goal. But if you refine that and you change the mindset around it and you say, execute scheduling this semester well, just like changing the language behind it can make it a more pleasant experience. So for example, I'm looking at one of the goals that we're going to read later, and I noticed that they have it framed in more of a negative light. So just thinking about how to frame your goals as a positive statement, so that when you're thinking about it, writing it down, maybe manifesting it in different places, it's bringing like good energy instead of negative energy.
Yeah, for sure. And kind of going off of that, I think it's really important, even if you're looking at a long term goal, to try to figure out how to make it a part of your daily routine. So that may look more like creating that system and having something that you do every single day that works towards that long term goal. Or if that's something that is a bit overwhelming for you, start by just saying affirmation. So going back to the book example, maybe you start the first week and every day you wake up and you say, I am going to write a book this year, and start to get that, mindset flowing. You're talking in that positive way to yourself. You're making yourself believe that you can achieve this goal. And then going after those little steps that'll get you there is a little less daunting because you're starting off on the right foot.
Yeah, definitely. I'm a big affirmations gal. I used to have sticky
Yeah.
notes around my room in my
Yep.
apartment. Another tip is to remember that your goals don't have to be like static. Like if you set a goal on January 1st and you're halfway through the year and you're realizing it's not working for you, you're not even close, you can change the number. You can refine that
Mhm.
goal. So take a look and see if things were too easy, too hard, taking unrealistically long, things like that. Because you don't have to get to December and feel bad about yourself for not accomplishing something, because you set these goals yourself. So that means you can change them if they're not working for you. So just be sure not to think of goals as like this super static thing, because I think they can be dynamic, especially considering like if your life situation changes or like you live somewhere new or your circumstances change, like your goals should change with them. So just keep that in mind. They don't have to be these like scary, like written in concrete things.
Yeah, for sure. And then my next one, you kind of talked about this a little bit, is to create checkpoints throughout the year. So again, I'm going to go back to the writing a book example since we have that. So the achievable goal was to write 6 blog posts throughout the year to get you closer to be able to write a book. So maybe you go into your calendar and you give yourself, quasi due dates for these blog posts. You want to have them done every 2 months. And so this way now, come March 1st, if you start on January 1st, you want to have your first blog post pretty much ready to go. If you find that, you still want to put X amount of work and research and stuff into the blog post, or you find that you were ready to publish it a month ago, now you've created this checkpoint where you can say to yourself, maybe 10 blog posts is something that's attainable for me, or maybe only 3 is what works for me because I want to make sure I'm putting out my quality work. And you've kind of taken away, the stress of trying to figure out when you're gonna edit your goals, or the stress of feeling like you're not progressing in the way that you want to, which kind of leads into my next tip, which is to not be too hard on yourself if you're not progressing towards the goal the way you thought that you were going to progress. So I feel like a lot of us create goals and we think it's going to be a really linear path to succeeding in that goal. And we think, well, if I just write every single day, then I'm obviously going to write 6 blog posts and they're going to be phenomenal and I'm going to be rich and famous by the end of the year. At least that's how I think sometimes. But obviously things happen. Writer's block, you get sick. Like life just gets in the way sometimes. So I think a good example to look at is, I think this is one of your goals, Anya. If your goal is to read 12 books in the year, say, and you mentally tell yourself, okay, I think the best way to achieve this is to read a book a month. We could have another March like we did this past year where all of a sudden you've read 6 of the 12 books. And then maybe in August, you have a wicked busy month and you can't finish one. The progress towards your goal isn't super linear. It doesn't look the way that you want it to, but just because you had a tough month in August doesn't mean that you should just give up on the goal altogether. Like look at the progress as a whole, look at how far you've come. Because even if your goal is 12 books and you only read 10, odds are it's probably still, it's more than 0. It's probably more than what you did last year, or at the very least kind of in line with what you did last year. And you're still reading, you're still doing the thing that's beneficial and that you wanted to achieve. So don't be so hard on yourself. I think a lot of people have an all or nothing mindset where if the goal isn't completely successful and perfect, they just give up on it. And I think a lot of people would be a lot happier and feel a lot more motivated if they accepted that their progress isn't going to be linear and accepted that, as long as you're working towards something beneficial for you, that in and of itself is a good thing. If you reach the full goal, that's a bonus.
Love that. Love that sentiment.